Cordelia Whitmore's heart nearly stopped when the smallest child whispered her name through cracked lips as she approached the weathered fence post. 3 children sat bound with fraying rope, their clothes little more than rags, their faces streaked with tears and dust from the Arizona Territory's unforgiving sun. She had ridden out to investigate the commotion her neighbor Ezekiel Tanner had mentioned, something about abandoned children near the old Miller property, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Mama Cordelia," the little girl repeated, her voice barely audible above the desert wind. The child couldn't be more than 5 years old, with auburn hair that caught the morning light like spun copper and eyes the color of sage after rain. Cordelia's breath caught in her throat because those were the exact words her deceased daughter Mercy would have spoken, in that same sweet, trusting tone that had been silenced by fever 3 winters past. The 2 older children, a boy who appeared to be around 10 and a girl perhaps, 8 stared at Cordelia with the wariness of young animals who had learned that adults meant either salvation or suffering. Their faces bore the hollowed look of children who had known too much hunger and too little kindness. Yet something in their posture suggested they had been protecting the youngest one with fierce determination. Cordelia's hands trembled as she reached for the knife at her belt to cut their bonds. She had buried her husband Nathaniel 2 years ago when his heart gave out during harvest time, and their only child had followed him to the grave shortly after. The ranch house had echoed with silence ever since, filled only with memories and the sound of her own footsteps moving through rooms that had once buzzed with life and laughter. "How do you know my name, little sparrow?" Cordelia asked gently as she freed the youngest child first. The girl's tiny hands immediately reached for her, fingers grasping at Cordelia's worn cotton dress as if afraid she might disappear like a desert mirage. The warmth of that small body against hers awakened something Cordelia had thought died with her own family. The older boy spoke for the first time, his voice cracked from thirst but filled with protective authority beyond his years. "Our ma told us stories about a kind lady named Cordelia who lived in a house with blue shutters and helped folks when they needed it most. She said if anything ever happened to her, we should find you." His name, he told her, was Jeremiah, and the middle child was his sister Temperance. The little one, who had started this extraordinary encounter by speaking Cordelia's name, was called Beloved, a name that made Cordelia's heart clench with both pain and hope. As she lifted the child into her arms, she noticed the girl's eyes held an otherworldly wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young, as if she had been sent by Providence itself to fill the aching void in Cordelia's life. "Where is your mother now?" Cordelia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer from the haunted expressions on their faces. Jeremiah's jaw tightened with the burden of being the eldest, the one who had witnessed whatever tragedy had led them to this fence post in the middle of nowhere. "She's gone to heaven," Temperance whispered, tears cutting fresh tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "The fever took her last week, and the people in town said we had to leave because there wasn't nobody to pay for our keep. They tied us here and said someone would come for us, but we've been waiting 2 days." As Cordelia gathered all 3 children close, breathing in their scent of dust and desperation and something indefinable that reminded her of hope itself, she made a decision that would change all their lives forever. The empty rooms in her house suddenly seemed less like a mausoleum and more like a gift waiting to be filled with new voices, new dreams, new possibilities for love. Cordelia's ranch house came into view as they crested the hill, and she felt the 3 children shift in the wagon beside her, their silence speaking volumes about their mixture of hope and terror. The blue shutters that Jeremiah had mentioned caught the afternoon light, and Cordelia realized with a start that somehow their mother had known intimate details about her home despite never having met her. The mystery of that connection would have to wait right now. These children needed food, baths, and the safety of 4 walls around them, Beloved had fallen asleep against Cordelia's shoulder during the ride, her small fist still clutching the fabric of Cordelia's dress as if afraid to let go. The child's complete trust was both heartwarming and heartbreaking, reminding Cordelia of how her own mercy had curled against her during thunderstorms or after bad dreams. The similarity was so striking it made her wonder if fate had orchestrated this encounter. Inside the house, Cordelia set about transforming her quiet sanctuary into a home suitable for children. She heated water for baths while Temperance helped set the table with dishes that hadn't seen use since before Nathaniel's death. Jeremiah insisted on chopping firewood despite Cordelia's protests, his young shoulders already carrying the weight of being the man of any family he belonged to. "Your mama must have been a remarkable woman to raise such responsible children," Cordelia said as she brushed the tangles from Beloved's hair after their baths. The little girl sat perfectly still, occasionally murmuring "Mama Cordelia" in a way that suggested she had been saying those words long before today. The endearment felt both foreign and familiar on Cordelia's heart. That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table eating the first real meal the children had enjoyed in days, Jeremiah finally began to share their story. Their mother, Aurelia Hawthorne, had been a seamstress in the nearby town of Cedar Falls until consumption weakened her beyond recovery. She had spent her final weeks telling them stories about people and places she claimed to have seen in dreams, including a lonely widow named Cordelia who lived in a house with blue shutters. "Ma said you had the saddest, kindest eyes she'd ever seen," Temperance added, studying Cordelia's face with the directness of childhood. "She said you needed us as much as we'd need you someday, and that God had a way of bringing broken pieces together to make something beautiful." Cordelia's breath caught at these words because they echoed something Nathaniel had often said during their courtship, that broken people could heal each other if they were brave enough to trust. She had dismissed such notions after losing her family, but sitting here with these three children who had somehow found their way to her through impossible circumstances, she began to wonder if healing might indeed be possible. As she tucked the children into beds that had stood empty for too long, Cordelia felt her house coming alive around her. Jeremiah insisted on sleeping on the floor beside his sister's bed until he was certain they were safe, while Temperance quietly asked if she could keep the lamp burning low because the darkness frightened her. Beloved, however, settled into sleep as if she had always belonged in this room, in this house in Cordelia's life, standing in the doorway watching them sleep. Cordelia realized that for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than the hollow ache of loss. These children had arrived tied to a fence post like unwanted livestock, but somehow they had brought with them the possibility of redemption, not just for themselves, but for a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be needed, the mystery of how their mother had known about her, about the blue shutters, about the loneliness that had consumed Cordelia's days would require investigation. But tonight, as she listened to the sound of children breathing peacefully in her home, Cordelia allowed herself to believe that sometimes miracles came disguised as desperate circumstances, and that love had a way of finding even the most carefully guarded hearts. 3 weeks into their new life together, Cordelia discovered the leather-bound journal hidden among the few possessions the children had brought with them. Temperance had been reluctant to unpack their mother's things, treating the small bundle like sacred relics, but when Beloved grew feverish one night, she had insisted they needed her mother's lavender sachets to help her sleep peacefully. Inside the journal, written in Aurelia Hawthorne's careful script, Cordelia found pages upon pages describing dreams so vivid they read like memories. Dreams of a ranch house with blue shutters where a woman named Cordelia Whitmore grieved for her lost family. Dreams of 3 children who would find healing in that woman's care, and a woman who would find purpose in their need. Most startling of all were the sketches detailed drawings of Cordelia's face. Her house, even the interior rooms, drawn by someone who had never set foot on her property. "Your mother was a seer," Cordelia said gently to Jeremiah as they sat on the porch that evening, watching Temperance teach Beloved to braid dandelions into chains. "She had the gift of true dreams, didn't she?" Jeremiah nodded solemnly, his young face reflecting the burden of keeping adult secrets. "People in town thought she was touched in the head toward the end. But we knew better. She saw things that were going to happen, and she prepared us for them." The journal revealed that Aurelia had been dreaming of Cordelia for months before her death, watching through supernatural sight as the lonely widow struggled with grief and isolation. More remarkably, the dreams had shown her glimpses of a future where all four of them, Cordelia and the three children, formed a family bound not just by circumstance but by genuine love and mutual healing. As summer deepened into autumn, that prophetic vision began manifesting in unexpected ways. Cordelia found herself humming while she cooked, something she hadn't done since Mercy's death. The children's laughter echoed through rooms that had known only silence, and their presence had awakened protective instincts Cordelia thought she had buried forever. When Beloved began calling her Mama without the qualifier of her first name, Cordelia's heart recognized the title as both gift and responsibility. The town of Cedar Falls initially viewed their arrangement with suspicion, but Cordelia's fierce protection of her newfound family soon silenced most criticism. When the schoolmaster suggested the children might be better served in an orphanage, Cordelia's response was swift and uncompromising. These children belonged to her now, and anyone who attempted to separate them would answer to her personally. Meanwhile, an unexpected romance was beginning to bloom in the most unlikely place. Dr. Lysander Cromwell, who had been called to treat Beloved's fever, found himself making frequent visits to check on the family's welfare. A widower himself, with kind gray eyes and gentle hands, he seemed to understand the delicate process of hearts learning to trust again after devastating loss. "You've brought those children back from the brink," he told Cordelia one evening as they watched Jeremiah teach his sisters to rope fence posts in the corral. "But more than that, they've brought you back too. I've watched you these past months, and you're not the same woman who used to come to town with grief weighing down her shoulders." Cordelia felt heat rise in her cheeks at his observation because it was undeniably true. The constant presence of children who needed her had slowly eroded the walls she had built around her heart. Their questions, their problems, their small triumphs and daily needs had pulled her back into the world of the living, where hope was possible and future plans made sense. But it was Beloved who sealed the transformation one evening when she climbed into Cordelia's lap and announced, "Mama said in my dreams that Dr. Lysander makes you smile with your whole face, not just your mouth. She said that's how you know someone's good for your heart." The child's matter-of-fact delivery of this supernatural message left both adults speechless, but it also removed any pretense about the feelings growing between them. As winter approached, Cordelia realized that Aurelia's journal had shown her only the beginning of their story. The dream spoke of a future where love would multiply rather than divide, where healing would create space for new happiness, and where a family forged by necessity would be strengthened by choice and commitment. Winter brought challenges that tested their newfound family bonds in ways none of them had anticipated. When a blizzard struck in early December, trapping them in the house for nearly a week, Cordelia discovered that close quarters with three energetic children required patience she wasn't certain she possessed. Yet somehow, watching Jeremiah carve wooden toys for his sisters by lamplight and seeing Temperance patiently teach Beloved her letters, she realized these children had brought more than chaos to her orderly existence. They had brought the messy, beautiful reality of life itself. Dr. Lysander's visits during this period became less about medical necessity and more about the natural pull of hearts recognizing their match. He would arrive with supplies for the family and stay to help Jeremiah with his studies, or to play checkers with Temperance while Beloved braided ribbons into his hair. His easy way with the children convinced Cordelia that his affection extended beyond her to encompass the entire family they had created. "I never thought I'd want to be a father again," he confided to Cordelia one snowy evening as they stood watching the children perform an elaborate play. They had written about brave pioneers and magical talking horses. His first wife had died in childbirth, taking their unborn son with her, leaving him certain that his capacity for family love had been buried with them. "But these three have shown me that a man's heart can stretch to hold more than he ever imagined possible." The proposal came not through grand gestures or formal speeches, but through Beloved's innocent question during Sunday breakfast. "Mama Cordelia, when is Dr. Lysander going to live here with us forever?" The child's directness cut through weeks of careful courtship and polite circumnavigation of deeper feelings, forcing both adults to confront the truth they had been approaching gradually. "Would you like that, little sparrow?" Cordelia asked, her heart hammering against her ribs as she waited for the answer that would determine her future happiness. All three children nodded enthusiastically, Jeremiah adding that Dr. Lysander had already promised to teach him proper medical techniques for treating injured animals, while Temperance mentioned his pledge to help her start a garden come spring. Wedding took place in the ranch house parlor on Valentine's Day, with the children serving as witnesses and the preacher from Cedar Falls performing the ceremony. Cordelia wore her mother's pearl necklace and a dress that Temperance had helped her alter, while Dr. Lysander, now simply Lysander to her heart, wore his best suit with a boutonniere that Beloved had insisted on making from dried wildflowers. The most profound moment came when Lysander formally adopted all three children during the same ceremony, giving them his surname and legal recognition as his own. Jeremiah Cromwell, Temperance Cromwell, and Beloved Cromwell, the names rolled off their tongues like music, completing a transformation that had begun at a fence post and culminated in legal and spiritual union. "Your mother knew this would happen," Cordelia whispered to Beloved that night as she tucked her daughter, for that's what she truly was now, into bed. The child smiled with the serene confidence of someone who had always known her dreams would come true, reaching up to touch Cordelia's face with small fingers that held infinite trust. "Mama said families aren't just born, they're chosen," Beloved replied, repeating words that could have come from Aurelia's journal but felt fresh and true in the mouth of a 6-year-old who had found her way home through impossible circumstances. She said some people have to lose their first family to appreciate their second one enough. As Cordelia and Lysander began their married life, they discovered that blending their separate griefs had created something stronger than either had possessed alone. His medical practice thrived with the support of a wife who understood both healing and loss, while her ranch prospered under the care of a man who brought scientific methods to agriculture and genuine love to family life. The House with Blue Shutters became known throughout the territory as a place where miracles were not only possible but expected, where broken hearts could mend and lonely souls could find the family they were meant to have. And at the center of it all, three children who had once been tied to a fence post like unwanted burdens now ran free across acres of land that belonged to them as surely as they belonged to it. Spring brought news that would expand their family circle in the most unexpected way. Lysander returned from a medical call to the neighboring county with information that made Cordelia's heart race with possibility and dread in equal measure. A young woman named Octavia Fairchild had given birth to twin girls but died in the process, leaving behind an infant son from a previous relationship and the newborn twins with no family willing to take responsibility for their care. The father disappeared when he learned she was carrying twins, Lysander explained as they sat on the porch watching their three children chase fireflies in the twilight. "The babies are healthy, but the boy he's about 4 has been inconsolable. Since his mother died, the county wants to separate them and send them to different orphanages. But something about the situation reminded me of how we found our children. Beloved, who had been quietly braiding grass nearby, looked up with the same otherworldly expression she had worn the day they met. "Mama, are you going to bring home the crying boy and his baby sisters?" Because in my dreams I saw them sitting at our kitchen table, and the boy wasn't crying anymore. Her matter-of-fact delivery of this supernatural insight no longer surprised any of them. They had learned to trust her visions as completely as they trusted Aurelia's journal. The decision to expand their family from 5 to 8 members wasn't made lightly. But when Cordelia saw 4-year-old Phineas Fairchild clutching his infant sisters while social workers debated their fate, she knew they belonged with her family. The boy's fierce protection of the babies reminded her so strongly of Jeremir's guardianship of his own sisters that she felt destiny repeating itself in miniature. "We have room in our hearts and our house," she told the overwhelmed officials. "These children need a family, and we need them just as much." Lysander's ready agreement and the enthusiastic support of Jeremir, Temperance, and Beloved made the legal proceeding swift, though not without complications that tested their resolve. Phineas proved to be a challenge unlike any they had faced with their first 3 children. His grief manifested as rage, destruction, and a stubborn refusal to accept comfort from adults who might disappear as his mother had done. Only Beloved seemed able to reach him, speaking to him in whispers that gradually calmed his violent tantrums and helped him sleep through nightmares that left him screaming for his deceased mother. "He's not broken," Beloved explained to Cordelia one evening after a particularly difficult day when Phineas had destroyed half the vegetable garden in a fit of fury. "He's just scared that love means losing. Mama Aurelia showed me in dreams how to help him remember that some grown-ups stay forever." The 6-year-old's wisdom about trauma and healing astounded the adults, but they had learned to trust her insights completely. Meanwhile, the twin girls, Serafina and Evangeline, brought their own blessings and challenges to the household. At 6 months old, they demanded constant attention, but their presence seemed to awaken nurturing instincts in all the older children. Even Phineas, when not lost in grief-fueled rage, showed gentle protectiveness toward his baby sisters that hinted at the loving boy he had been before. Tragedy struck his small world. The logistics of managing 8 people in a house designed for a smaller family required creative solutions and endless patience. Lysander added rooms to accommodate the growing household, while Cordelia organized schedules that ensured every child received individual attention despite the demands of the group. Jeremir and Temperance rose to the challenge of being big siblings to even more little ones, their own experiences with displacement making them especially sensitive to the newcomer's needs. Sometimes I think Aurelia's dreams showed her more than just our original family. Cordelia mused to Lysander as they watched Beloved teaching Phineas to feed chickens while the twins napped in a basket nearby. Maybe she saw all the children who would find their way to us, all the hearts that needed healing, all the love that was waiting to be shared. The ranch prospered under the management of such a large family, with everyone contributing according to their abilities. Even young Phineas, when his grief allowed, showed remarkable skill with animals, while the older children took pride in their expanded responsibilities. The house with blue shutters became known throughout the territory not just as a place where miracles happened, but as proof that love could multiply infinitely when hearts remained open to its possibilities. As summer deepened and their second year as a family approached, Cordelia realized that what had begun as an impulsive decision to rescue 3 children from a fence post had become something far greater, a living testament to the truth that families are indeed chosen, that love creates more love, and that sometimes the most broken circumstances can produce the most beautiful outcomes. By their second anniversary as a complete family of 8, The Cromwell household had developed rhythms and traditions that felt as ancient as they were intentional. Sunday mornings found them all squeezed around the kitchen table that Lysander had enlarged twice to accommodate their growing circle, while evenings brought story time in the parlor where even baby Seraphina and Evangeline seemed to listen with rapt attention to tales of far-off places and magical adventures. Phineas had finally begun to heal from his profound grief, though the process had been neither linear nor simple. His breakthrough came unexpectedly during a thunderstorm when Beloved crawled into his bed to offer comfort during the frightening weather. "My first mama died too," she whispered to him in the darkness, "but Mama Cordelia loves us just as much, maybe even more because she chose us special." From that night forward, Phineas began calling Cordelia Mama with the same natural affection as the other children. The twins had grown into toddlers with distinct personalities that delighted and challenged their large family in equal measure. Seraphina possessed an adventurous spirit that required constant vigilance, while Evangeline showed early signs of the same intuitive gifts that made Beloved such an unusual child. At 18 months old, Evangeline would point to empty chairs and babble as if greeting invisible visitors, leading Cordelia to wonder if the supernatural connections in their family extended beyond just Beloved and Aurelia's prophetic dreams. Jeremiah, now 12 and showing signs of the man he would become, had expressed interest in following Lysander into medicine. His natural leadership abilities and gentle way with the younger children suggested he would make an excellent doctor, though Lysander was careful not to pressure him toward any particular future. "A boy should choose his own path," he told Cordelia, "but I'd be honored to teach him everything I know if that's where his heart leads him." Temperance had blossomed into a young lady whose creative talents manifested in everything from elaborate storytelling sessions for the little ones to beautiful embroidery work that decorated their home. At 10 years old, she showed remarkable maturity in helping manage the household while maintaining the playful spirit that made her beloved by her younger siblings. Her special relationship with the twins had developed into something approaching maternal devotion. The ranch itself had expanded to accommodate their growing family's needs and ambitions. What had once been a modest cattle operation now included a substantial vegetable garden, a chicken coop that provided eggs for the whole territory, and plans for adding sheep to their livestock. Every member of the family, regardless of age, contributed to their collective prosperity through chores appropriate to their capabilities. "We've created something remarkable here," Lysander said to Cordelia as they stood on the porch watching their 6 children play an elaborate game that seemed to involve knights, dragons, and a considerable amount of dramatic dying. His arm around her waist felt as natural as breathing, and the contentment in his voice matched the peace in her own heart. "I never imagined family could feel this abundant." The town of Cedar Falls had not only accepted their unconventional family but had come to regard the Cromwells as pillars of the community. Lysander's medical practice served families throughout the territory, while Cordelia's reputation for taking in strays, both animal and human, had brought them visitors who needed everything from temporary shelter to permanent homes. House had become an unofficial refuge for anyone requiring help, hope, or simply a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. But perhaps the most profound change had occurred in Cordelia herself. The grieving widow who had once believed her capacity for love had died with her first family had discovered that hearts, like houses, could be expanded to accommodate far more than originally seemed possible. Each child had brought not only their own needs but their own gifts, creating a family tapestry far richer than anything she could have imagined during her years of solitude. "Mama," Beloved said one evening as they prepared for bed, "I dreamed about Mama Aurelia last night, and she was smiling so big because all her dream children found their dream family. She said to tell you that love isn't something you lose when people die, it's something that grows bigger so it can hold new people too." the 8-year-old's wisdom about grief and healing continued to astound the adults in her life. As they tucked 6 children into beds throughout their expanded home, Cordelia and Lysander marveled at how completely their lives had been transformed by a moment of compassion at a fence post. What had begun as rescuing 3 abandoned children had evolved into creating a haven where love multiplied exponentially, where healing happened gradually but completely, and where the future stretched ahead filled with infinite possibilities. For joy. 10 years had passed since that fateful morning when Cordelia first heard her name whispered by a child tied to a fence post, and the ranch house with blue shutters had become the heart of a story that would be told throughout the Arizona territory for generations to come. The Cromwell family had grown not just in number but in influence, their example of chosen family and unconditional love inspiring countless others to open their hearts and homes to children who needed them. Jeremiah, now 22 and freshly graduated from medical school back east, had returned to establish his own practice alongside Lysander. His gentle manner with patients reflected the healing environment in which he had been raised, while his expertise had already saved lives throughout the territory. His engagement to the schoolteacher, Miss Cordelia Ashworth, named for the woman who had inspired her parents' belief in second chances, promised to continue the family tradition of love, multiplying through marriage. Temperance had become the territory's most sought-after seamstress and storyteller, her shop in Cedar Falls serving as an unofficial gathering place where women shared news, advice, and the kind of community support that strengthened entire settlements. At 20 years old, she had inherited her mother's nurturing spirit and channeled it into caring for others, through both her skilled needlework and her gift for listening to troubled hearts. Beloved, now 16 and possessing a ethereal beauty that matched her mystical insights, had developed her supernatural gifts into a calling as the territory's most trusted midwife and healer. Her ability to sense what expectant mothers and newborns needed had saved countless lives, while her dreams continued to provide guidance that prevented tragedies and revealed solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Young men traveled from distant towns hoping to court her, but Beloved remained serenely focused on her calling to help others. Phineas had grown into a strapping young man of 14 whose way with animals had made him indispensable to ranchers throughout the territory. His early trauma had been transformed into exceptional empathy for wounded creatures, both human and animal, and his skills as a horse trainer were already legendary. The rage that had once consumed him had been alchemized into passionate protection for anything vulnerable or hurt. The twins, Seraphina and Evangeline, now 11 years old, had indeed inherited supernatural gifts that complemented Beloved's abilities. Seraphina could sense illness or injury in humans and animals long before symptoms appeared, while Evangeline possessed the ability to locate lost people and objects through dreams that showed their exact locations. Together, they formed a formidable team of young healers who promised to carry their family's legacy of miraculous interventions into the next generation. "We've witnessed something extraordinary," Lysander said to Cordelia as they sat on their porch swing, watching their grandchildren Jeremiah's twin boys chase chickens in the yard, while their grown children supervised with the same patient love they had received in their own childhoods. What began as rescue has become revelation about the true nature of family, love, and divine intervention in human lives. The house itself had been expanded multiple times to accommodate not only their large family but the constant stream of visitors who came seeking the healing environment that the Cromwells had created. Guest rooms housed traveling medical colleagues. Temporary shelters provided safety for women and children fleeing difficult circumstances, and the dining room table that had once seated just Cordelia now regularly accommodated 15 or 20 team people sharing meals and stories. Aurelia Hawthorne's journal had become a treasured family heirloom, its prophetic dreams having proven accurate in ways that continue to astound everyone who read its pages. But more than predicting the future, the journal had provided a roadmap for creating the kind of love that transcends biological connections and transforms desperate circumstances into miraculous outcomes. I understand now what Aurelia saw in her dreams, Cordelia said to Beloved as they prepared Sunday dinner for their extended family and the usual collection of guests who had found their way to their table. She didn't just see us rescuing you children, she saw you children rescuing us, teaching us that hearts broken by loss could be healed by choice, that families are created by commitment rather than blood, and that love doesn't diminish when it's shared but multiplies beyond all reasonable expectation. As the sun set over the Arizona territory, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that seemed to bless their gathering, 4 generations of the Cromwell family sat down to share a meal that represented far more than nourishment. It was communion, celebration, and testimony to the truth that sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin with the simplest acts of compassion. The fence post where 3 children had waited for salvation still stood on the edge of their property, now marked with a small plaque that read, Here Love Began Jeremiah, Temperance and Beloved Cromwell. Found June 15, 1875. Visitors often stopped to read those words and hear the story of how a lonely widow's moment of mercy had created a legacy that would inspire others to open their hearts to the abandoned, the orphaned, and the lost. In the end, Cordelia Whitmore Cromwell had discovered that the greatest love stories aren't always about romance between 2 people, but about the miraculous expansion of hearts that learn to embrace far more than they ever thought possible. Her name, whispered by a desperate child at a fence post, had indeed been a summons to a destiny greater than grief, a calling to create the kind of family that exists not by accident of birth, but by the deliberate choice to love without limit, to heal without reservation, and to believe that broken pieces, when brought together with intention and care, can create something more beautiful than anything that existed before.